Yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown it in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead, make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here today on the big program. Lots of things to get to, lots to talk about. Ticking down to the final day. Next Tuesday, the big day, election day. And still talking about emails. And look, we're going to be talking about emails, I'm sure, right up until till the end of time, it appears at this point. I understand tomorrow going to be another WikiLeaks drop, and Donald Trump knows it's happening, and he will talk about it tomorrow, which, again, a little uncomfortable with all of that. And I'll tell you what really makes me uncomfortable. News reports that the Klan, that the neo-Nazis, that the white supremacists, that the alt-right, that every fringe, radical, right-wing, crazy group, they're going to get out and with the express goal to suppress our voters. Going to go to urban areas and you can't make this stuff up. Going to hand out 40s and weed. Like, yeah, everybody who goes to election day in urban areas going to be swayed by a 40-ouncer and a bong. Yeah, that's going to happen. And again, I guess it shows just how crazy we are and how much we don't understand one another and how stereotypes can really sway some bit of thinking. We're going to go down and hand out some 40s and nobody's going to vote. Not like, look, you offered me a 40, I'll take it, and I'm still going to vote. It just means I'm getting something for free. You just got to wonder. But today I woke up to the article over at Politico that said the neo-Nazi leader, and I'm not even going to say his name, that he's mustering thousands of people and across all 50 states who are going to get out, and they're going to go to places like Philadelphia, and they're going to harass, they're going to intimidate, they're going to attempt to sway we the people from getting out to the polls. Now, the crazy right-wing group, the Oath Keepers, which, again, you got to love some of the insanity that comes along with that. They are a group of former law enforcement people who were probably thrown out because nobody wanted them, also former military people. Evidently, they claim they're going to be showing up in fully in regalia, and that they're conducting undercover and intelligence gathering. So they're gonna be watching. I feel so much better to know that a group of crazy people are going to be watching us. And this is the thing when you look at Trump's rhetoric, that everything's rigged, that the election's going to be stolen from us, and it's those, tick down the list of minorities and gender specific folks, go down the list of others that the Trump campaign has thrown out, and that's where the targets are. And we see that at Trump rallies where we got targets of Hillary and we got targets of all of this insanity. And you go, wow. Now, how much of this is just a case of these folks who are, as I saw it reported, serial exaggerators? I'm not sure. I mean, these are folks who they love to prop themselves up, whole bunch of self-aggrandizement. We're bigger than we are, and they're more of us crazy people, to where in the past, a handful show up. Is that the case? Or really, is there really, honestly, truthfully, a possibility of violence come Election Day? Is there really a large number of people out there who are so disenfranchised in their existence that they're going to show up armed? Because it seems like all of these poor people who are crazy seem to have a lot of guns and a lot of time on their hands and a lot of weaponry and a lot of time to go shooting things. Maybe a job would help. Just kind of a thought. But I look at this and I go, Trump's rhetoric about the election being rigged and stolen and on all sides, kind of scary to me. And look, I'm not thrilled with the electronic voting machines at all, never have been. But there's a lot of heated rhetoric on both sides. And look, both extremes are trying to accomplish the same goal, and that is delegitimize the ballot box. Make us think that whomever is that person who gets the most votes come Tuesday night won't be legitimate. And I got to tell you, as someone who is conservative in the way I think of institution, because conservatives used to believe in institutions. They used to believe the idea that change should happen slowly. We don't have radical shifts back and forth. We believe in our foundation. That used to be the conservative mantra. Now conservative just code for crazy. Now conservative just code for let's burn everything down and tear things up and point fingers. That's what conservatism seems to me today. Hopefully, maybe, possibly, someday, I can hope, can I, that we get honest, true conservatives who, honestly, I can have agreements and disagreements with and still come to some common ground. We used to do that in this country. It used to happen. There used to be things we agreed on. We used to have government that was functional. We cannot have another 4 years like the last 6. We can't. The rest of the world is looking at us for our leadership, and this is where the right wing has the rhetoric right, but the action's completely dead flat wrong. The rest of the world is looking for someone to go, hey, who's going to be the one to lead the way? Is it going to be us in our banana republic kind of dysfunctional election season like we've had? Or is it going to be someone like the Chinese, who right now are making historic agreements in places like Africa and Malaysia and building big stuff? So at some point you got to go, I think this childish bickering and really, honestly and truthfully, the debates were just like listening to my children go at it with less vulgarity and less toilet humor or less locker room talk or any of that. But it's the same kind of bickering. And it's very childish. So when I see that now the crazy people are being reported on, because understand, we used to look at them kind of out of the corner of our eye and go, sorry, we should get you help. Now we're putting them on the front page. Now we're saying these are the folks who are going to be watching our democratic process. Really? The craziest guy in the room with the thickest tinfoil hat? He's now the guy that my democracy, the whole democratic process, the whole faith and backing of our ballot box, this is who we're relying on? The guy who's burying rice and guns all over the neighborhood and can't remember where he buried it? Really? This is where we're going? And the answer is, sadly, yes. Now, there are some people who are saying, Rick, we got to make sure that there aren't people stealing the election. And while you may have the Traditionalists Workers Party, which is another crazy white nationalist group, in Ohio, you might have, this other crazy, the American Freedom Party, which is another one of these crazy groups. You've got all these people out there, the socialist, all nonsense groups coming to Pennsylvania while you've got all this stuff going on. There is voter fraud happening. We found it. I know it was like looking for Waldo, but we did. And I know the news media didn't pick up on it very much. But last week in Des Moines, Iowa, there's a 55-year-old woman, Terry Lynn Rote. She was arrested on the suspicion of casting 2 ballots. And I don't know at this point that it's actually suspicion, since she did go on Iowa Public Radio and admit as much. She said that, she cast her first ballot and that she feared, because of Donald Trump, that her first ballot would be changed to Hillary Clinton, that she got the bright idea that she would go back and cast another one. And my question in this, and again, this is what happens when the minimally intellectual are given big concepts. If they were going to change and rig the first one, don't you think by committing a felony and possibly going to jail and losing your right to vote forever, don't you think the second one would have been changed as well? I mean, it's really just maddening. And look, I don't know that I blame Donald Trump anymore. He's just the circus leader. The sad reality is we've allowed too many in this country to fall behind. I know during the Bush years, there was no child left behind. I think at some point in this country, we have to have a no citizens left behind initiative, to where some of these crazy people, we kind of teach a bit of common sense. We kind of bring them into the world of learning critical thinking skills. Because sadly, the most reactionary are the ones who lack just the basic understanding of how you reason something out. Like, for instance, they're going to change my first vote, so I went and cast me a second, without thinking that if they cast a second one, and they rigged the first one, wouldn't the second one get rigged too? And oh, by the way, the consequences of doing that are prison and never being able to vote again. I mean, stop and just for a minute think about it. Quite amazing. So when we come back, we're going to talk about this insanity, what kind of craziness we're seeing. Also, some more. Gotta love me some Michelle Bachmann. Some more Michelle Bachmann and your thoughts. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1955. That was the day that the song 16 Tons first made an appearance on the Billboard Country Music Chart. It would reach the top spot and stay there for 10 weeks. 16 Tons told the story of the hard lives faced by coal miners. The song talks about falling into debt at the company's store, a reality faced by many coal mining families. The song had first been recorded by Merle Travis in the mid-1940s. The song borrowed lyrics from things that Merle had heard from his father, who was a coal miner. Merle Travis sung the songs of working people. He was labeled a red and communist, and during that era, stations would not play his music. 16 Tons was recorded again by Tennessee Ernest Jennings Ford in 1955. Tennessee Ernie's grandfather and uncle had both been in the mines. Tennessee began to perform 16 Tons to enthusiastic crowds. He then recorded it as a B-side to his single, You Don't Have to Be a Baby to Cry, for Capitol Records. But the B-side recording became a hit. The song was so popular, it jumped off the country charts and took the pop music #1 spot for 8 weeks and became a gold record. Since then, 16 Tons has been covered by a variety of artists, from Johnny Cash to Tom Jones and Tom Morello to ZZ Top, and has become a true labor standard.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Officially in love with Michelle Bachmann, even if she's batshit crazy. Rick Smith.
It's all brand new. I'm crazy for you, and you know it's true. Yeah, I'm crazy for you.
Oh, yes. I miss Crazy Michelle. I mean, 2012 was so much fun. You had Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs running around trying to out-crazy each other, and it was a fun kind of crazy, as I remember. And you look at 2016, you go mean, angry, bitter, insanity. Just wow. But Michelle Bachmann kind of back in the news. She was doing a radio interview, I guess it was yesterday, where she basically said that the emails were discovered thanks to God. God made sure that the FBI got a hold of former sexting Congressman Anthony Weiner's laptop, and now God wants you to vote for Republicans. I guess that's basically the spiel. Never mind all of the insanity of what Trump has done and what he said. No, don't forget about that. Don't look behind the curtain. God wants you to vote against Hillary Clinton. Just wow. Deluded, insane, but still love her. Still, absolutely. Anyway, here to talk a little bit about this election cycle, which I got to be honest, getting crazier by the day as we tick down the final days. I've asked Peter Montgomery, Senior Fellow with the People for American Way. They also do this great thing called Right Wing Watch, which is the reason we've got Peter here. Peter, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks. I'm very happy to be here.
So we see these reports, we see the stories of the marginally intellectual grabbing their guns and their notepads and heading into urban areas because we're going to watch those folk. Kind of scary.
It is kind of scary. And, it goes directly to the top. This is something that Donald Trump has stirred up with his claims that the vote is going to be rigged against him and that Pennsylvania is the only way he can lose Pennsylvania is if it's stolen from him. And he sort of, made these vague suggestions that people should go watch polling as if they, and so the far-right groups that are rallying around him are taking him up on that. And so we've got these pretty troubling reports of white nationalists and Oath Keeper militia types saying that they're going to show up and do what exactly? I guess, challenge people of color who they don't think they look like should be voting. It's really not clear what it is that they think they're going to do when they show up at these precincts other than provide an intimidating presence.
Yeah, and the thing that gets me, and this is what is really concerning, because, look, I don't know how much of the reports that we're hearing from Politico and the New York Times and all of these places are actual credible threats, and how much of it is just serial exaggeration. But at the end of the day, the more you feed into this frenzy and you get people who are basically angry to begin with, well armed on top of it, not a good recipe.
Yeah, I think you're right to be skeptical about some of these claims. I think the Politico story was, quoted somebody saying they're going to go into black neighborhoods and give out, 40-ounce beers and weed. That sounds like some right-wing white person's idea of what you would do in a black neighborhood. That does not sound remotely like something that's actually going to happen. But there are a lot of people who Trump has convinced that, the elites, the media, Hillary Clinton is somehow conspiring to steal this election from him. And that is a dangerous kind of rhetoric. I think it's the kind of rhetoric that makes it more likely that there would be violence on Election Day or after Election Day.
And the thing that bothers me is it's the innocent people who are going to get caught in the crossfire, if there is. And I got to be honest, I don't think there's going to be any of this. I think what's going to happen, you're going to have people who are going to talk big, because I find this with my experience with a lot of these folks. They talk a good game, but once you call them on it, they back down, because basically most of them are cowards to begin with, and they need that kind of groupthink mentality to give them that courage. At least that's my thought.
Well, I think that a lot of that is true. On the other hand, one of the things that we have seen this year is that Trump has really energized, white nationalist groups to get involved in politics in a way that they never have before, to do mainstream things like voter registration. And, David Duke at one point was encouraging his followers to go volunteer for the Trump campaign. And they've bought robocalls in swing states. So he has made a place for white nationalists who, until now, had been really marginalized in our public discourse. And it was a good thing that they were marginalized in our public discourse. But he's created space for them, and I think that's troubling. And I think that this there's various new organizing efforts going on. As we talked briefly about this unity rally that's going to be held in Harrisburg this weekend, there's some other sort of movement building activities that are taking place because regardless of the outcome of the presidential election, these folks who are enjoying the feeling that Trump gives them want to keep that going. So I don't think they're going to go away if and when he loses the presidential election.
Yeah, but let's say on Tuesday it's an overwhelming landslide, which I've heard positions all over the map like you do. But let's say there's a pushback and a repudiation of what's being sent out. Do they continue to organize, or or are they going to be marginalized? Or worse yet, I mean, do we see with the Hillary Clinton presidency, do we see that kind of anger grow? Because most of them are gun nuts to begin with, and I'm sure from day one the NRA is going to stoke that fire. So maybe this could go even, as you've said, could get even worse.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to predict what might happen. I think that I've been hoping that the NRA crying wolf in 2008 and 2012 that, they basically told their members twice in a row that if Obama was elected, he was going to come try to take their guns, and it was the end of the Constitution. And that has been proven false. And so I'm hoping that their crying wolf like that will make similar cries this time clear. Hillary Clinton has made it clear she supports the Second Amendment, and she's not out to take anyone's guns away from them. And so hopefully some sanity will prevail there. And, hopefully some other Republicans will, try to prevent Trump from giving in to his worst impulses, or try to at least blunt the impact of that if he does lose.
Yeah, I'm betting on whether he gives a concession speech if he loses. I don't think he does. I think it gets ugly. But here's the thing: I look at a lot of these folks who, to be honest, they're angry for cause. A lot of communities have lost jobs. They've lost industries. Families are struggling to make ends meet. And in a lot of communities that I've been through and been a part of, you've had those job losses, which weren't just job losses. It was really ripping the soul out of the community and the identity of some of these folks. So, of course, if you have nothing there, you're seeking for that identity, and sadly, it's gone this way. To me, the idea of a growing economy, and this is where President Clinton is going to have to figure out how to bring jobs back and give opportunity for folks, even these kind of crazy people.
Well, yeah, I think it was one of the really important things about having Bernie Sanders in the race in the primaries, because I think you're absolutely right. The nugget of truth behind some of what Trump says is that there are communities that have been devastated by the global economy, and in some ways, both parties have let them down. And I think that by Democrats failing to have a really effective way of dealing with economic inequality and dwindling opportunities for the middle class, kind of left the door open for a right-wing demagogue like Trump to come in. And so I think it was really important to have Bernie Sanders in the race to make it clear that there are other ways to approach this. There are other ways to call out, the hurting, the hurt that the economics have caused, but to have a progressive kind of populism and to say, we want to take care of everybody. And I'm hoping that, under a Clinton administration, people like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and other progressive voices will help her find ways to reach out to some of these Trump voters who feel like they've been left behind and feel like they don't have a stake in the country. And hopefully Hillary Clinton will find a way to do that.
Yeah, but I don't have great hopes, because at the end of the day, she's still going to have a Republican House, which possibly a Democratic Senate. We still don't know yet, but the House is probably going to go to the Republicans. And I see the kind of gridlock and obstruction and all of that to where nothing gets done. And I fear that the Republicans who have created Trump with their rhetoric and with their obstruction end up creating a monster much worse that they then even can't control then.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is possible. I mean, I think Trump was in some ways the Frankenstein's monster that they created. I mean, this is, his path has been paved by, 10 or 20 years of Fox News, of right-wing radio and media, and the Republican Party going along with, blatant falsehoods and fear-mongering because they thought it was helping them win elections. And so they sort of created the climate and the constituency for that, and they lost control of it this year with Donald Trump. So it is not clear that they can, immediately get it back under control, even if he loses. Yeah. And one of the things that I fear is that among all these angry people who he has motivated, some of them indeed, deplorable, racist, white nationalists, that we're going to see, 100 or 1,000 little Trump wannabes running for office around the country the next time around, and we'll have this, proliferation of the kind of rhetoric that he has, brought into the political arena.
Yeah, but fortunately, most of them don't have the kind of charisma and money that Trump has, and hopefully they're turned away as just crazy and cranks. But my problem again, you go to. Let's say Hillary does win next Tuesday. I'm already seeing calls for impeachment, and she hasn't even taken office yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that we cannot count on the Republicans in Washington to act responsibly. We've seen those calls. We've seen we've seen senators basically saying that, we said that we wanted to keep the Supreme Court seat open for the next president, but we didn't really mean that. If a Democrat wins, we're just going to block every judicial nominee for the next 4 years. I mean, that is the idea that those folks can just say that and and then pledge to be supporters of the Constitution is remarkable. I mean, that is such an undermining of the Constitution and abandonment of the role of the Senate and the president to work together to keep the courts running, that I'm kind of stunned, even though I should no longer be surprised by what comes out of the mouths of Republican officials. I'm stunned to hear the way some of them are talking about the Supreme Court and seem to be gleeful about provoking a constitutional crisis during a Clinton presidency.
No, I'm with you. But I've been saying for a while, the reality is in this country, we were willing to elect a black man before we were elect a white woman. I cannot imagine how bad the next 4 years are going to be if the Republicans remain in power of the House or the House and the Senate. Because what's scary is you're right. They could conceivably tie things up, and we could end up borking the next 5 or 6 nominees, and the whole and democracy as we know it, our government, our institutions as we know it, grind to a halt. And it's then that really is scary, because that's when these crazy groups, I think that's when they take over.
Well, and I think that it's going to call upon a lot of creative, smart thinking among progressive people to figure out how to push back on that and to help make sure that most Americans, I mean, I think that most Americans are going to vote against Donald Trump, and I think he's going to lose. And I think that is a sign that most people still aren't going for that. And I think that we can use that and we can build on that to call out Republicans who are engaging in, this kind of destructive obstructionism. We can call them out for putting party before country. But yeah, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. Last question I've got for you, on the email front, because as Michelle Bachmann said, it's manna from God, basically.
I think if God wants to send a message, he could have done it without involving Anthony Weiner's dick pics. But that's just my opinion.
That's probably the best place to leave that. Mic drop. Nice job, Peter. I appreciate it, man.
Thanks.
Great talking with you, Peter Montgomery, Senior Fellow at the People for American Way. You want to check out their website? We've got a link at thericksmithshow.com. Just click on Peter's name, take you right there. I'm sure there's a better way. He's right. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labor special report recorded on Wednesday, November 2nd, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. November 2nd is the International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists. It is a day set aside by the United Nations to remind people of the crucial role journalists play in improving society. It is especially aimed at getting authorities to end impunity, the practice of not investigating and prosecuting crimes against journalists. The labor organization at the forefront of the fight to protect journalists and have crimes against them investigated is the International Federation of Journalists. The IFJ is the world's largest organization of journalists with more than 600,000 members in 170 countries. It estimates that in 2016, the number of journalists and media staff killed is more than 66. Over the past decade, some 800 journalists have been killed. Today, the IFJ is particularly concerned with the situation in Turkey. In response to a failed military coup, the Turkish government has cracked down on journalists. 90 journalists are in jail. 2,500 journalists have lost their jobs, and arrest warrants for dozens more have been issued. The UN agency, which is responsible for organizing events surrounding International Day to End Impunity for Crimes Against Journalists, is UNESCO. Frank LaRue is UNESCO's Assistant Director General of Communication and Information. He was interviewed by Priyanka Shankar of UN Radio.
In this decade, the violence against journalists has been increasing systematically. Last year, 2015, was the second highest level of violence in the decade, which is very tragic. In this year, we have 76 cases of assassinations up to the month of October. It is already becoming, if the trend continues, the highest level of assassinations out of over 800 assassinations that have occurred in the decade. About 60% of cases happen in countries in armed conflict, but at least 40% of cases happen in countries that are not in armed conflict. So still very preoccupying phenomenon.
Why exactly are people committing crimes against journalists?
I think it's due to several reasons. One is that we have levels of violence growing that are not necessarily linked to armed conflict. Some of them, we have more crises in the world, more wars, more conflicts, but we also have more organized crime, for instance, and drug trafficking, which is the case in Latin America, or more racism and xenophobia around the world, and ethnic conflicts and national conflicts, boundaries. So I think this sort of level of conflictivity in the world has grown. So the attack against journalists that cover these news increases as well. The other question, I think, is there's a bigger demand for transparency from the public, so there's more investigative journalism denouncing corruption, reaction to that. And finally, I would say the question of impunity. November 2nd is the International Day Against Impunity, declared by UNESCO, and we see that there's a trend to think that journalism is by nature a dangerous profession, and therefore it is natural that it has violence. And this is not true. We should never agree on this. And the reason is because there's no investigation. All acts of violence against journalists should seriously be investigated and the culprits been brought to process.
What can journalists themselves do to face crime and impunity?
Journalism has provoked